Welcome back, guys, to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I, of course, am your host, John Knopick, and I want to thank you guys, first off, top of the show. Thank you guys so much for all of the viewerships, all of the listening hours, all of the subscriptions you guys have been, excuse me, putting up on YouTube, as well as listening on Spotify, iHeart, Apple, Amazon podcasts. I mean, you guys, it means the world to me that you guys are listening, that you're tuning in, that you want to come back and then find out more about what's going on in the world. It's greatly appreciated. You know, I'm trying to keep this as energetic and informative as possible, and I can't do that without you guys' support. Leave me comments on my clips that come up on YouTube and the other social media platforms. Send me messages. I'm at Smorgasbord JK on all social media platforms, as well as you can send me an email, john@knopickventures.com. Let me know what you guys think about what my shows have been about recently, you know, with the Canadian Prime Minister election, with the United States-China tariff situation. This week's topic being the Middle East, especially the India-Pakistan conflict that they're going through. I want to know what you guys think, because this show is all about you guys as well. It's a smorgasbord because it is a collection of everybody's thoughts, feelings, experiences, all coming together to make a nice big stew for us to enjoy every week. So let me know what you guys think. Again, Smorgasbord at SmorgasbordJK on all social media, or leave a comment in any of the YouTube clips that you see me put up, or john@knopickventures.com. I greatly appreciate it. And again, thank you guys so much for all of the support and watching these numbers climb to levels I never thought possible, even within the last 4 days. Now, before we dive into today's episode, I wanted to get you guys caught up on some major developments tied to our last show, again, involving the Canadian Prime Minister situation, as well as the United States-China situation. Because as you guys know, the world has not stopped turning, and neither have the headlines. So we're going to start out in Canada. In Ottawa, Mark Carney, as you know, is Canada's new Prime Minister. He's going to be unveiling his first cabinet in a swearing-in ceremony this week after leading the Liberals to victory in a dramatic federal election. Now, unlike down here in the States, Carney's Liberals won a minority government, ousting Pierre Poilievre's. If you're Canadian and I botched the name, I apologize immensely. Pierre's Conservatives, and capitalizing on a wave of public backlash to the United States trade threats. And we know what Mr. Carney had been very outspoken about those, but ended up having to walk him back after having meetings with President Trump down here in the White House. Now, the NDP, led by Jagmeet Singh, suffered major losses and fell below official party status. Carney's first priorities included forming a new cabinet, which all new leaders have to do, delivering a speech from the throne, not that throne, it's not George R.R. Martin or anything, and introducing his government's first budget, which unfortunately he's going to be expected to focus on affordability, green investment, as well as restoring stability to Canada's economy, something they've been looking for a very long time. Now, of course, Canada's economy, as you guys are well aware, is still feeling the impact of that ongoing trade situation. Since the start of this year, Canadian exports to the United States have dropped 18%, and tariffs have pushed canola and seafood exports even lower. Canola exports to China are now expected to fall below $1.5 billion this year, and seafood exports are even down 30%. Food prices unfortunately remain high up in the great country of Canada, soon to be 51st state, just joking, with canola, oil, pork, and seafood seeing the biggest jumps, and unemployment has now risen to 6.1%, especially in the manufacturing and agriculture sectors. Prime Minister Carney's government is pushing a Team Canada approach, investing in that green infrastructure and seeking new trade deals around the world, but political tensions are rising as the economic pain continues to get worse. Now, on the global trade front, there's major news just today. If you have not tuned into the news, the United States and China have announced a breakthrough deal to de-escalate the trade war. Both countries have agreed to drastically roll back their steepest tariffs for an initial 90-day period. The United States will reduce its tariff on Chinese goods from 145% down to just 30%, while China will lower its tariffs on American goods from 125% all the way down to 10%. Both sides will keep this 10% baseline tariff in place during the pause and have agreed to suspend or remove recent retaliatory measures while they continue the negotiations. President Trump has announced he will be signing a new policy into law that will lower U.S. tariffs to match those of any country that reciprocates, aiming for a more level playing field in global trade, which is an excellent idea. This 90-day truce is expected to bring some relief to global supply chains as well as financial markets, but the long-term outcome will depend on whether the two sides can reach a more permanent agreement in the coming months. Now, excuse me, we will continue to keep watching how these economic and political shifts play out and what they mean for Canadians, Americans, the Chinese, as well as the global economy as a whole. So that is getting you guys caught up on what happened with regarding episode 5 and everything involved in that. Going to take a quick little break, be right back, and we will start episode 6 of the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. This episode is going to be called The Middle East in Crisis. We'll be right back here on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Stick around. Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners. Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. All right, welcome back, guys. This is the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I, of course, am John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in or for catching me on YouTube, wherever you may be listening or viewing from. Again, like I said, this episode this week is going to be focusing on Middle East crisis, with a big focus as well on the India-Pakistan situation. So we're naming this episode The Middle East Meltdown, a Feast of Fire and Fury. Now, this episode is one for the history books because the Middle East is on fire. Again, if you're like me and you're in your 40s, you're well aware of all the tumultuous times that the Middle East has gone through, from the Persian Gulf War to Iran and Iraq to Afghanistan to Pakistan and everything in between. Now, unfortunately, this time though, the flames are higher, the stakes are greater, and the world is watching with bated breath. Now, you ask yourself, how did we get here this time? What set off this latest inferno? And is there any way out? Now, let's rewind the moment where the fuse was lit. For months, tensions simmered across the region. In Israel and Gaza, a fragile ceasefire was already fraying and getting thinner and thinner by the day, punctuated by sporadic rocket fire and retaliatory airstrikes. In Lebanon, Hezbollah's rhetoric was growing more aggressive, fueled by economic collapse and political deadlock. In Iran, hardliners were consolidating power, emboldened by the perceived weakness of our previous administration, which a lot of countries unfortunately took advantage of over that 4-year span, as well as the stalled nuclear talks. And in the Gulf, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates were quietly ramping up their defenses, wary of Iran's growing influence and the potential for regional conflict. The United States, on the other hand, was distracted by domestic politics, and Russia and China were making moves of their own, seeking to expand the influence in that very region. The spark, unfortunately, on this inferno came on a humid night in late June, when a drone strike hit a crowded market in southern Lebanon, in a town called Nabatia, a stronghold of Hezbollah. Now, dozens of civilians were killed, including women and children. The images were horrific and things you do not want to Google search, guys. Believe me, that's the kind of stuff that will give you nightmares. And they did quickly spread across social media, as I just said, igniting outrage and calls for revenge. And it ramped up so much that even here in the States, they were doing a lot of different types of protests and things because of what happened over there. Israel, of course, denied responsibility, claiming it was targeting a Hezbollah weapons depot. But unfortunately to them, the damage was done. Hezbollah vowed revenge, promising a response that would, quote, shake the foundations of the Zionist entity. So basically a lot of saber rattling was going on from that drone strike. Within hours, they did live up to their word, and rockets rained down on northern Israel, targeting towns and cities along the border. The Israeli Air Force responded with overwhelming force. They launched airstrikes against Hezbollah positions in southern Lebanon and the Bekaa Valley. The border lit up with artillery fire, and within days, the conflict had spread like a California wildfire. First to Gaza, where Hamas and Islamic Jihad joined the fray, then to the West Bank, where protests turned violent, and soon all the way over to Syria and Iraq, where Iranian-backed militias began targeting, unfortunately, United States forces. But was the drone strike really a work of Israel, guys? Some analysts actually pointed to the sophistication of the attack, suggesting it could have been a false flag operation by a third party, perhaps even a rogue faction within Hezbollah itself, seeking to spark that flame and provoke a wider war and undermine the group's leadership. Others speculated that it could have been a foreign intelligence agency like the CIA or Mossad, looking to destabilize the region and advance their own agendas. As you can tell, conspiracy theories were running rampant with this one, guys, where there was no clear-cut instigator in this particular instance. Although there were some that were a little more outlandish of theories than others, they all definitely had their own merit. Social media exploded with these theories. Was it the CIA, the IRGC, Mossad, or, as some conspiracy-minded Telegram channels claimed, and this was one that just boggled my mind when I read it, a deep state operation designed to keep the region in perpetual chaos and maintain the flow of money and power to those who benefit from conflict. That one boggled my mind, but if you think about it in the grand scheme of things, with the way the deep state operates around the world nowadays, it's not as far-fetched as you may think. But as the violence escalated, old alliances were tested and new ones were forged. Egypt and Jordan, for example, longtime peace partners with Israel, they found themselves under pressure from their own populations to condemn Israeli actions and distance themselves from the Jewish state. Turkey, never one to miss an opportunity to grandstand on the international stage. They loved that spotlight. They called for an emergency summit of Muslim nations seeking to position itself as the defender of the Palestinian cause. Try to be all Homelander with that situation. Iran, meanwhile, saw an opportunity to assert itself as the leader of the so-called Axis of Resistance, rallying its proxies and allies across the region. Revolutionary Guard units moved into Syria, and Iran-backed militias in Iraq began targeting U.S. bases and convoys, ratcheting up the pressure in D.C. Tehran's rhetoric grew more bellicose, with Supreme Leader Khamenei issuing fiery pronouncements and vowing that the Zionist entity will be erased from the map. Iranian state media even broadcast images of missile convoys and anti-aircraft batteries being deployed along the borders, sending a clear message of defiance to Israel and its allies. The world's media descended on the region, as you would expect, and the images were harrowing: burning buildings in Beirut, families fleeing airstrikes in Gaza, Israeli civilians and citizens huddled in bomb shelters, and Syrian refugees once again on the move, seeking shelter from the storm. The United Nations, as you would expect, called for restraint, but the Security Council was paralyzed by vetoes and finger-pointing, as it just become commonplace nowadays over there, unfortunately, unable to agree on a resolution that would satisfy all the parties. The United States, Russia, China, well, each of them pursued their own agendas, further complicating the situation and undermining any hope of a unified international response. And in the background of all of this, the rumor mill just continued to churn and churn and churn, fueled by misinformation, propaganda, and those conspiracy theories. Some claim the entire crisis was orchestrated to drive up oil prices, benefiting Gulf monarchies and energy companies while punishing Western consumers. Others whispered that the chaos was a distraction from the secret nuclear negotiations between the Iranian government and the West, allowing both sides to make concessions without appearing weak. Still, others insisted that the violence was being stoked by arms manufacturers eager for new contracts, profiting from the bloodshed and perpetuating the cycle of conflict. But for the people on the ground, the causes mattered less than the consequences, folks. In the space of a week, the Middle East had gone from uneasy calm to open war, plunging the region into chaos and uncertainty. The fuse was lit, and no one seemed able to put it out, as the flames spread rapidly, threatening to engulf the entire region and beyond. Now we're going to take another little short break here, and we're going to dive into exactly how the dominoes fell and how the regional powers all started to pick up sides. So stick around. We'll be right back here on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, or for joining me on YouTube. We'll be right back after this short break. Stick around. Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners. Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in. We are right now in the middle of talking about the Middle East conflict, focusing also on India and Pakistan as well, but the entire Middle East as a whole, since it's back up engulfed in flames once more, unfortunately. Now, as the fighting intensified, the conflict grew quickly in regional powers, each with their own agendas, red lines, and long-standing grievances. Israel, facing attacks on multiple fronts and feeling increasingly isolated on the international stage, mobilized its reserves and launched a massive air campaign against Hezbollah positions in Lebanon and Hamas targets in Gaza. The Israeli government declared a state of emergency, granting sweeping powers to the military and security forces. Prime Minister Cohen, in a televised address to the nation, warned that no enemy, foreign or domestic, will threaten the security of the Jewish state, vowing to defend Israel's borders and protect its citizens at all costs, basically drawing a massive line in the sand. Hezbollah, emboldened by Iranian support and sensing an opportunity to strike a blow against its longtime enemy, unleashed its arsenal of rockets and drones, targeting not just northern Israel, but also strategic sites in the Golan Heights and even so far south as Tel Aviv. The group's leader, Hassan Nasrallah, appeared on television, his face grim and determined, vowing to fight until the last drop of blood and promising to inflict unprecedented pain on Israel. Hezbollah's fighters, battle-hardened from years fighting in Syria, launched cross-border raids and ambushes, seeking to disrupt Israeli military operations and sow chaos and fear among the civilian population. In Gaza, Hamas and Islamic Jihad, facing mounting pressure from Israel and Egypt, saw an opportunity to break out of their isolation and assert their relevance. The two groups joined the fray, launching their own barrages of rockets and mortars into Israel and calling for a third intifada across the West Bank. Hamas's leader, Ismail Haniyeh, I apologize if I botched that, issued a fiery statement urging Palestinians to rise up against the Israeli occupation and promising that victory is near. Hamas's fighters dug into their tunnels and bunkers beneath Gaza, prepared for a long and bloody fight, determined to resist Israel's onslaught and defend their territory. Now, where's Iran in all of this, you ask? Well, Iran, meanwhile, saw an opportunity to assert itself as the leader of the so-called Axis of Resistance, as I mentioned previously, trying to rally its proxies and allies across the region and challenging the dominance of the United States and its allies. Revolutionary Guard units began moving into Syria, ostensibly to protect Shia shrines and support the Assad regime, but also to establish a forward operating base for Iranian operations in the region. Iranian-backed militias in Iraq, emboldened by Tehran's support, began targeting the U.S. bases and convoys, seeking to drive American forces out of the country and assert their Iranian influence. Tehran's rhetoric grew more bellicose, with Supreme Leader Khamenei issuing fiery pronouncements and vowing that the Zionist entity will be erased from the map. And Iranian state media broadcast images, as we mentioned, of those missile convoys and anti-aircraft batteries. Now, Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates, long wary of Iran's ambitions and fearful of the spread of radical Islam, quietly increased their own military readiness, preparing for the possibility of a wider regional conflict, while at the same time publicly calling for calm and urging restraint. Now, both countries began moving troops to key oil installations and air bases, as those become prime targets for any nefarious opposition. There were reports, these were unconfirmed though, that were widely circulated among intelligence circles that the Saudi jets had intercepted Iranian drones over the Gulf, preventing them from reaching Saudi oil fields. In the shadows, Gulf intelligence agencies ramped up their cyber operations, targeting both Iranian and Israeli networks, seeking to gather intelligence and disrupt their adversaries' operations. Now, Turkey, again, as I said, they want to be the ones that want to be front and center and going, look at us, we're the awesome country. They went ahead and sent humanitarian aid over to Gaza and called for an international boycott of Israel, seeking to pressure the Jewish state to end its military operations. President Erdogan, never one to shy away from the spotlight or miss the opportunity to criticize the West, as he loves to do all the time, accused us and our allies of double standards and hypocrisy, arguing that they were quick to condemn violence by Palestinians, but slow to criticize Israeli actions. He's basically saying we're kissing Israel's butt and telling Hezbollah where to go. Erdogan warned that the blood of Palestinian children will not be forgotten and vowed to continue supporting the Palestinian cause. And Turkish troops at the same time increased their patrols amongst the Syrian border, wary of Kurdish militias and the possibility of spillover violence from a conflict. Now, back here in the States, we were totally caught off guard by how fast this thing escalated. And at the time, we were getting more and more pressure from outside sources to respond to what's going on over there. Because unfortunately, we were always known as the world police, and we had to solve everybody else's problems, even though we had so many here in the States that are not being handled, like veterans affairs and other things like that, the homeless crisis and mental health issues. But hey, solve the Middle East stuff first. So our government, scrambled to protect our assets in the region and prevent a wider war. The Pentagon ordered the evacuation of non-essential personnel from embassies in both Baghdad and Beirut, fearing they could become targets of attack. Now, the United States warships, they moved closer to the eastern Mediterranean Sea, positioning themselves to provide support to Israel, as you would expect, and deter further escalation. Vice President Harris, why would we call her President Harris? Because you know as well as I do, she never made it into office, and she would never make it into office because she's Queen Word Salad. But yeah, President Harris, that's what Biden called her once, in a televised address to the nation, called for restraint and urged all parties to de-escalate. But critics accused the administration of being slow to respond and lacking a clear strategy for dealing with the crisis. And of course, you got to have your wild cards in all of this as well. The unpredictable actors whose actions could tip the balance and plunge the region into even greater chaos. Russia, with its military bases in Syria and close ties to Iran, quietly reinforced its positions but avoided direct confrontation with Israel or the United States because they knew that would not end well, seeking to maintain its influence in the region without provoking that wider conflict. China, ever the pragmatist and seeking to expand its economic and political influence around the globe, like by buying up all of our land, called for peace and offered to mediate between the warring parties, but its motives were questioned by all sides, wary of its growing power and close ties to Iran as well. European leaders, meanwhile, were just paralyzed with fear by internal divisions, as well as the fear of a new refugee crisis, unable to agree on a unified response to the conflict. And in this spot as well, there were conspiracy theories. Some claim that Russia and China were secretly coordinating to weaken the United States' influence in the region, seeking to create a new world order, for you wrestling fans, in which they would be the dominant powers. Others insisted that the United States was deliberately letting the conflict spiral out of control, seeking to justify new military intervention and reassert its dominance in the Middle East, much the same way that happened with 9/11, letting those towers go down. People were unfortunately cannon fodder, and because of that, Bush was able to invade Iraq, even though Iraq had absolutely nothing to do with the 9/11 attacks. Those were all done via the government. Still, others pointed to the sudden spike in cryptocurrency prices, suggesting that shadowy financial interests were profiting from the chaos. As a conflict, were being used as an opportunity to manipulate the markets and enrich themselves. But for millions of people across the Middle East during this entire time, the only reality was fear, uncertainty, and the constant threat of violence. Air raid sirens wailed, food and water supplies dwindled, and the constant threat of airstrikes and rocket attacks became the new normal. The dominoes had fallen, unfortunately, and no one knew where they would stop as that region teetered on the brink of all-out war. Going to take a quick little break here, guys. We're going to come back with a real-time update on some happenings over in the Middle East, so stick around. This is the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I'm John Knopick. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in, and we'll be right back. Stick around.
Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners.
Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Welcome back to the Smorgasbord. I am, of course, John Knopick. Thank you guys again so much for tuning in, be it here on YouTube or any of the podcast streams. Thank you guys so much. Now, we've been talking about the Middle East conflict, and I'm going to take a step back and do a little pause because we got a real-time update because the world's two most volatile flashpoints, Gaza and Kashmir, are both making headlines today, May 12th, 2025. As of this morning, Hamas has announced the release of the last living American-Israeli hostage in Gaza, a move widely seen as a gesture toward the Trump administration, which is pushing for a new ceasefire. Yet, even still with that happening, the violence continues. An Israeli airstrike on a school-turned-shelter in Jabalia killed at least 16 people today, mostly women and children, according to the Gaza Health Ministry. President Trump is actually on his first official Middle East visit of this term, with stops in Saudi Arabia and other key countries, aiming to shore up alliances and push for progress on the Israel-Hamas conflict, as well as the fragile truce in Lebanon. Now, over to Southeast Asia, where the world just watched India and Pakistan pull back from the brink of catastrophic destruction, thankfully, at least for now. After 4 days of the most intense fighting in decades involving airstrikes, missile attacks, and drone warfare, both India as well as Pakistan agreed to a U.S.-brokered ceasefire that took effect at 5 p.m. India Standard Time on May 10th. I got Israeli on the brain. At 5 p.m. India Standard Time on May 10th. The Director of Generals of Military Operations from both sides held direct talks, reaffirming the truce and agreeing to halt all military action along the line of control in the international border. The spark for this latest conflict between India and Pakistan was a terrorist attack on April 22nd in Pahalgam, Kashmir, which killed 26 civilians, including terrorists. India responded with Operation Sindoor, a series of cross-border strikes targeting what it described as terror infrastructures in Pakistan. According to Indian officials, over 100 militants were killed in these operations, key sites in Bahawalpur and Murdik. I don't know. I'm really bad with these names, and I'm trying to get better at it, guys. So I apologize. The alleged headquarters of global terror organizations were destroyed. Prime Minister Narendra Modi addressed the nation, making several points clear. A. Operation Sindoor is only paused, not ended. India will closely monitor Pakistan's actions in the coming days. B. India will not tolerate any nuclear blackmail, referencing unconfirmed reports that the United States were intervened to prevent a possible escalation to nuclear conflict, which could be the spark of World War III if that did go to that level. C. Talks with Pakistan, if any, will focus solely on terrorism in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir. Terror and talks cannot coexist. Water and blood cannot flow together, Modi said, referencing the continued suspension of the Indus Waters Treaty. And D. India's air defense systems reportedly intercepted and destroyed multiple Pakistani drones and missiles, while 32 airports that were closed during the conflict are now operating. While on the ground, the ceasefires brought a mix of relief as well as anxiety. In Kashmir and Punjab, many families still remain in shelters, with blackouts are still being enforced in cities like Amritsar and Srinagar as a precaution. Both sides have accused each other of minor violations since the ceasefire began, trying to spark things back up, and there have been reports of sporadic drone sightings and shelling in some border areas. Internationally, how are we taking all of this? Well, the ceasefire is being watched with cautious optimism. The United States, which has played a key role in brokering the truce, has called it a pause, not a peace, and urged both sides to address the root causes of the conflict. Meanwhile, political analysts warn that the agreement is fragile, with one expert describing it as a, quote, band-aid on a profusely bleeding wound. And for ordinary people, the uncertainty is palpable. Residents along the border, especially in Kashmir, are hopeful but wary, having seen previous ceasefires collapse. As one Kashmiri resident told Al Jazeera, The fear isn't just from the blasts, it's from the uncertainty and lack of transparency. Kashmiris are once again stuck in the middle with no refuge and no escape. And, the guns have fallen silent, but the peace is fragile. Both governments are under pressure to maintain this truce, but deep mistrust and unresolved issues, especially over Kashmir and terrorism, mean that the risk of renewed conflict remains high. The world is watching, hoping that this uneasy calm will hold, and that leaders on both sides will choose dialogue over destruction. Now I'm going to take another little break here. I'm going to dive into the next segment, which is all about the human toll and stories from the fire itself. So stick around. This is the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I'm John Knopick. Thank you so much for tuning in wherever you're listening or watching from, and we'll be right back. Stick around. Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners. Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I, of course, am John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Even if you're checking me out on any of your podcast feeds, or if you're listening to me on or watching me on YouTube, thank you guys so much. It is greatly, greatly appreciated. As I mentioned prior to the break, we're going to be diving now into the human toll with stories from the burning inferno, because behind every headline, guys, every airstrike, every political speech, there are unfortunately real people, families, children, elderly caught in the crossfire, struggling to survive in the midst of chaos and violence. And we turn our focus now to the human toll of this conflict, sharing stories from across the region, giving voice to those who are often overlooked and forgotten, which is also what I want you guys to do with giving me your comments and feedback, especially if you've been affected by this or anything that's going on in the Middle East right now. In Gaza, the al-Mazari family huddles in the basement of their apartment building, seeking shelter from the relentless airstrikes. Power is out, food's running low, and the children flinch at every distant explosion, their eyes wide with fear. "We have nowhere to go," says Amal, the mother of three, her voice trembling with desperation. "The border is closed, the shelters are full, and the bombs keep falling. We're trapped. We have nowhere to run, and no one can help us." Her husband, who was once a teacher, now spends his days searching for water and medicine, risking his life to provide for his family. Unfortunately, he returns empty-handed more often than not, his face etched with despair. And across the border, in Israel, the Cohen family has spent the last week in the bomb shelter, their lives disrupted and their sense of security shattered. Their youngest son, Elton, asks why he can't go to school. That's just a normal kid thing. Why can't I go to school? His innocent questions are a painful reminder that normalcy has been stolen from them. "We tell him it's a holiday," says his mother, her voice laced with sadness. But he knows. He hears the sirens. He sees the fear in our eyes. How can we protect him from this? How can we make him understand? He shouldn't have to understand. That's the thing, unfortunately. The family's home in Haifa was damaged by a rocket, leaving them with nothing but the clothes on their backs and the memories of a life that may never return. They don't know when or if they'll be able to return, their future uncertain and their hearts filled with dread. And it's just another example of, Israel and Gaza have been going on for so long, and there have been so many generations of families that have been absolutely devastated and displaced and had their lives completely ruined because of this ongoing conflict and the fact that they just can't get along and can't settle the differences. Even in Lebanon, for example, the situation's even more dire as the country's already fragile infrastructure crumbles under the weight of the conflict. Hospitals in Beirut, they're overwhelmed with casualties, struggling to cope with the influx of wounded and the shortage of supplies. Fuel shortages, they've crippled ambulances and emergency services, making it very difficult and almost impossible to reach those in need. Doctors working around the clock, 24, 48-hour shifts, often without pay and with limited resources, treating injuries from shrapnel, burns, and even collapsed buildings. "We are running out of everything," says Dr. Samir Haddad, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Medicine, blood, even clean water. And the wounded just keep coming. We're doing our best, but it's not enough. We need help, and we need it now." That just echoes the sentiment of all of these countries. They need this to end. There's too many human lives at stake, and the powers that be, unfortunately, don't care. They're only caring about their own interests and feeling that their side is right and everybody else's is wrong, and everybody's becoming cannon fodder and casualties because of it. And it's horrible. Syrian refugees, already displaced by years of civil war and struggling to survive in overcrowded camps, are once again on the move, seeking shelter from the latest round of violence. Camps in the Bekaa Valley are overflowing, and aid agencies warn of a looming humanitarian catastrophe as resources dwindle and the needs of the refugees grow more desperate. We thought we'd seen the worst, says Fatima, mother of 5, her eyes filled with tears. But now it's even worse. We are forgotten. No one cares about us anymore. And that is a horrible statement, but it's true. It is so true. They've become distant memories. And no human should be treated like that or forced to have to live in a world like that. It's sickening. And even in Iraq, Iranian-backed militias have targeted United States convoys, leading to deadly clashes and civilian casualties. In Baghdad, families stockpile food and water, fearing a return to the chaos of the early 2000s. The streets are deserted, and the sounds of gunfire and explosions echo through the night, a constant reminder of the violence that not only threatens to engulf the city, but the entire Middle East region as a whole. And it's humanitarian stuff like this that just takes your breath away, and it makes you think, what kind of a world are we living in that, people can't live peacefully without fear of death every single day because of powers that just want to control everything. It's horrific and just saddening to think about. And of course, even with all of the suffering, you've got your conspiracy theories laced in here as well. As I said, some people are saying that the aid convoys are being deliberately blocked to punish certain communities, preventing them from receiving the assistance they desperately need. Others insist that the foreign NGOs are secretly gathering intelligence for Western governments, using humanitarian aid as a cover for the espionage. In Gaza, some are even whispering that the tunnels beneath the city are being not just used for smuggling weapons and supplies, but for secret negotiations between Hamas and Israel, in a desperate attempt to find a way out of the conflict. The only brightness, or even brightness we would call it, the only light in the darkness, if you would call it that, there are stories out there of resilience and hope, moments of humanity that shine through this ugly darkness to offer a glimmer of light in the midst of all the despair I just mentioned. In Tel Aviv, volunteers deliver food and medicine to elderly neighbors, ensuring that they are not forgotten and that their needs are met. In Beirut, doctors and nurses form human chains to protect hospitals from airstrikes, risking their lives to save others. In Gaza, children are even painting murals on the walls of bombed-out buildings, transforming scenes of destruction into symbols of hope and resilience, dreaming of a future where peace is possible. Guys, the human toll of conflict, it's staggering. If you look at the grand scheme of things, it just boggles the mind, and it grows by the day. Millions upon millions of people have been displaced from their homes, their lives upended and futures uncertain. Thousands have been killed and injured, their bodies bearing the scars of war and the spirits broken by loss. But even in the darkest moments, the people of the Middle East have always found ways to endure, to resist, and to hope, clinging to their humanity and refusing to be defined by the violence that surrounds them. And I, for one, salute that. That just shows you that in the face of absolute uncertainty and chaos and potential destruction, they still find a way to persevere and come out stronger, and even with the battle scars, still finding ways to survive. So I absolutely salute them and the job that they're trying to do amongst all of this horrificness. And we're going to take another little break here, guys. We're going to get into the information war about all of this regarding truth, lies, and a buttload of propaganda. So stick around. This is the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I'm John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be right back. Stick around. Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners. Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Welcome back, guys, to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I am John Knopick. Once again, thank you guys very, very much for tuning in, be it either on your podcast feeds or here on YouTube, looking at my pretty little mug. Thank you guys so much. Now, let's dive into the information war part of this, the truth, lies, and all of the propaganda that's involved. Because in the 21st century, war is fought not just with bombs and bullets like back in the old school days, but with information as well. The current conflict is no exception to this rule. Both sides and their allies are waging a relentless battle for hearts and minds, using every tool at their disposal to shape public opinion, demonize their enemies, and justify their actions. State-run media in Israel, Iran, and the Arab world pump out competing narratives, each designed to appeal to their respective audiences and advance their strategic interests, kind of like here in the States. In Israel, the focus is on self-defense, the threat of terrorism, and the need for the national unity in the face of existential threats. In Iran and Lebanon, however, the message is one of resistance, martyrdom, and the struggle against oppression, portraying Israel as an illegitimate occupier and the United States as its enabler. I can kind of see that both sides of that coin. In the Gulf itself, media outlets walk a very careful line, condemning violence but avoiding direct criticism of powerful neighbors, seeking to maintain stability and protect their own interests. Social media, guys, as you are well aware, it's a battlefield all on its own, and it's only growing wider by the day. It's a chaotic and unregulated space where truth and lies mingle freely and where anybody can become a publisher, regardless of their credibility or motives or factual information. Hashtags trend and fade within hours, shaping public discourse and influencing perceptions of the conflict. And unfortunately, those hashtags can also be triggers for people's brains to move agendas certain ways as well. Videos of airstrikes, some real and some staged, go viral, spreading fear and outrage. Deep fake technology is used to create fake speeches by world leaders, and they're getting more and more real looking by the day to scary levels, sowing those confusion and distrust. WhatsApp groups spread rumors of chemical attacks, secret ceasefires, and foreign intervention, fueling panic and paranoia. We're going to look at conspiracy theories in this space as well, because you know that conspiracy theories can be blended into anything going on in the world. They offer simple explanations for complex events and appealing to those who feel alienated and disempowered. Some claim that the entire conflict is a simulation orchestrated by the global elites to test new weapons or distract them from economic crises elsewhere. A cynical manipulation of human suffering for their own gain, because you know as well as I do, they would absolutely jump on that opportunity if it presented itself. Others insist that the war is being used to cover up secret negotiations over oil, gas, or even water rights, a clandestine power grab disguised as a regional conflict, because, again, they can disguise any humanitarian crisis as a way for them to further their own agenda behind the scenes. Still, others point to the sudden appearance of new advanced drones on the battlefield, suggesting that foreign powers are using the conflict as a testing ground for the latest military technologies, treating the Middle East as a laboratory for their deadly experiments, something that I know they did not sign up for over there. Now, fact checkers and independent journalists struggle to keep up with the relentless flow of misinformation and propaganda, their efforts often drowned out by the sheer volume and content and the speed at which it spreads. In Beirut, a group of volunteers works around the clock to verify the videos and debunk false claims, battling against the tide of disinformation, which is getting higher and higher by the day. In Jerusalem, a startup uses the artificial intelligence to track the spread of disinformation, seeking to identify the sources and patterns of that manipulation. But that task is exceptionally daunting, and the resources are very limited, making it difficult to make a dent in the overall landscape of misinformation. Meanwhile, ordinary people are left to navigate a blizzard of conflicting information, struggling to discern truth from lies and to make sense of the chaos that surrounds them. In Gaza, families rely on word of mouth and trusted community leaders because that's all they've got to go on, seeking that guidance and reassurance in the absence of that reliable information. And over in Israel, many turn to encrypted messaging apps to share news and warnings, seeking to protect themselves from surveillance and censorship, which is not a bad idea in this day and age. In Lebanon, rumors spread faster than official statements, and trust in the media is at an all-time low, as people turn to alternative sources of information, often with disastrous results. The information war, guys, it's as fierce and as consequential as the battles on the ground themselves. In a world where truth is the first casualty and at times the most painful, the struggle to find that reliable information has never been more important, and that ability to discern fact and fiction is one massive critical skill for survival. And guys, we got one more major segment. We've got one more major segment coming up here, guys, and that's going to be about looking into the crystal ball and seeing what's next as the world holds its breath. So stick around. This is the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. Of course, I'm John Knopick. Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and we'll be right back after this short break. Stick around. Hey there, Smorgasbord listeners. Whether you're here for wrestling smackdowns, wild conspiracy theories, political hot takes, or just my questionable life advice, I want to hear from you. Hit me up on social media at SmorgasbordJK, or go full keyboard warrior and email me at john@knopickventures.com. Your message might just make it onto the show. Unless it's about pineapple on pizza, then you might want to rethink your life choices. Don't be a stranger. Now let's get back to the chaos on the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. All right, guys, welcome back to the Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I, of course, am John Knopick. Again, thank you guys very, very much for tuning in, whether it be through one of your podcast feeds or here on YouTube. Final segment of the episode is all about what happens next. The world is holding its breath. It needs to know which way this thing is going to play out. Is it going to get out of control and bring everybody involved, or are we finally going to be able to allow this to simmer down and tamper down the embers that are burning kind of brightly right now? Now, as the conflict rages on, the world watches, and we're worrying uncontrollably. These stakes could not be higher, and the potential for a wider war looms large. With so many actors, so many agendas, and so much firepower, both physical firepower and through electronical means in play, the risk of a regional conflict is real, and the consequences could be catastrophic. Diplomats currently are shuffling between capitals, searching for a way to de-escalate the conflict and bring the warring pieces to the negotiating table. The United Nations are calling for restraint, but its resolutions are being ignored by those who believe that force is the only language that their enemies understand. The United States and Russia, the two big superpowers, they issue stern warnings, but neither seems willing or able to force a ceasefire, with their influence diminished and their credibility undermined by years of failed intervention and broken promises. China, of course, trying to be the peacekeeper, because you know how awesome they are. They offer to mediate, but the motives are questioned by all sides, where it was growing power and strategic alignment with the Iranians. In this region, fear and uncertainty reign supreme as the people brace themselves for the next round of violence and struggle to cope with those daily realities of war. Again, they're trying to stay as positive as they can, but with things getting darker and darker by the minute, it's becoming harder and harder to achieve that. Oil prices have spiked, sending shockwaves through the global economy and threatening to trigger a recession. Refugees are streaming across any borders they can get across, overwhelming already strained aid agencies and creating new humanitarian crises. In Europe, leaders are worrying about those new waves of migration hitting their shores and the possibility of even terrorist attacks as the conflict fuels extremism and instability. And over here in the States, the conflict becomes a political football, with pundits and politicians arguing over who's to blame and what should be done. The debates often divorced from the realities on the ground. And then you got your wild cards, the unpredictable events that could change everything in an instant. What if Iran decides to launch a direct attack on Israel, escalating the conflict to a new level of intensity? What if Hezbollah's rockets hit a major Israeli city, triggering a massive retaliation? What if a stray missile lands in Turkey or Jordan, dragging NATO into the conflict and potentially sparking the Third World War? What if, as some conspiracy theorists even claim, the whole crisis is a prelude to a new world order, orchestrated by the shadowy elites for their own gain? A grand chess game played with human lives. No one knows, guys. No one knows how or when this fire is going to be put out. We don't have crystal balls. We don't have DeLoreans with Mr. Coffee makers. We don't have TARDISes. We don't have a way to know. We don't have hot tub time machines either. Some experts warn that the region's on the brink of a wider war. One could draw on global powers and reshape the world order, leading to a new area of conflict and instability. Others hold out hope for a negotiated settlement, pointing back to channel talks and secret meetings in neutral capitals. A glimmer of hope in the darkness. For now, guys, all we can do is watch, wait, and hope, clinging to the belief that somehow, some way, a reason will prevail and a way out of this crisis will be found. The Middle East is on fire, guys, and the world holds its breath, praying for a miracle. Now, guys, we want to hear from you. As I said, to my call to action both last week and today, I want to know, have you or your family been affected by the conflict? Do you have people over there who are actually fighting in the war? Is it affecting you somehow here if you live in the States or if you're over in Europe? I want to know what your guys' thoughts are. Let me know what you think about the episode, all the facts I brought to the table and things like that. Have you guys seen or heard conspiracy theories or misinformation online and want to help sort fact from fiction? Do you guys have questions about the history, politics, or the human cost of the crisis? Let me know. I want to know these things. I want us to have conversations about these episodes and these topics. You guys will help me fuel future episodes and future topics. I'm at Smorgasbord JK on all social media platforms, or John at knopickventures.com if you want to shoot me an email. And anytime you guys send me a comment or give me a suggestion or provide a story, I would absolutely love to feature those stories, questions, and even your own theories in a future episode. We're especially interested in listening or hearing from listeners over the Middle East. And, your perspective matters, guys. It means a lot. I love all the subscribers and all the followers, but comments and furthering conversation, they're huge. They're gold, especially when, we want to get to the bottom of what's going on in the world and try to make some sense of things and get some fresh perspectives. Now, if you happen to be a fact checker, historian, or just somebody with a unique take, let me know. Again, reach out to me. This smorgasbord is all about bringing together our diverse voices, opinions, and thoughts for a deeper understanding. Don't be shy. Don't feel like you're nervous about commenting. Just comment. Let's get the conversation going, guys. They're just words on the screen. That's all they are. This 2025 Middle East crisis, it's a stark reminder of how quickly old wounds can reopen and how dangerous the world remains when so many powers are at odds. As this situation evolves, we will continue to bring you guys the facts, the stories, and the rumors and conspiracy theories that shape our understanding of this crisis. As I said, I appreciate all of your feedback that I've gotten so far, all of the subscriptions, all of the listeners, all the subscribers. Greatly appreciate it. I'm going to be sending out a notification on social media tomorrow, getting your guys' thoughts on what the next episode of the Smorgasbord should be about. Of course, I still have the JFK episode in the can. We can talk professional wrestling if you want to go that route. If you have other conspiracy theories you'd like me to dig into and provide some insight on, I can do that as well. Let me know, guys. I want next week's episode to be a listener-driven episode. So I'm going to send out a feeler on social media, and I want you guys to give me your thoughts. Even if you don't want to comment, put in a vote. Write in something that you'd like to see me talk about on next week's episode, and I'll be happy to do it. But for now, we're coming to the close of the show. Thank you guys so much again for tuning in. This has been The Smorgasbord with John Knopick. I, of course, am John Knopick. Stay safe, stay curious, question everything, and ladies and gentlemen, take my advice, pull down your pants, and slide on the ice. Have a great week. Stay safe out there. Keep your eyes open. And thank you guys again so much for tuning in. And we'll see you guys on the next episode. Have a good night. See you later. Adios.